I'm Russ Kickle, and on this episode of American Reef, we're going to talk about what to do when you look at your freshwater planted tank and it looks so bad that you want to tear it down and start all over again. So what do I mean by when you look at your planted tank and you want to start all over again? Well, basically when you look at it and it's just covered with algae and it's just like looking nasty, right? Now in our particular case, what happened is the last freshwater planted tank video that I showed you was of Mike Paletta's about a year after kind of we showed the initial, we'll say, tank build. Well, basically, in that last video, we were talking about him wanting to implement a sump system into this planted tank. And so he did do that, right? He put a Miracle Mud sump system into the tank, and basically he kind of had a 4-month stint where he was doing a lot of speaking, and he didn't get to maintain and take care of that planted tank. Well, basically at the end of 4 months, he looked at it and it was just nasty, right? Not at all happy with what he had. And so he was going to start over again. But what he did is he reached out to some people that he knew. They gave him some advice and said, whoa, you don't need to start over again. Just do this, this, and this. So he did this, this, and this. And we caught up with Mike probably about, we'll say, a good month after that kind of renovation occurred. And he was really, really happy with his tank. And I figured it was a good time so we could do some Q&A so we all could learn from his mistakes. So again, that's what's going to be on deck for this week's video. And as always, if you're looking for American Reef's HPD, head out over to AmericanReefHPD.com, or you can go to AmericanReef.com and there is a store button in the top left-hand corner. Just click there and then you can go over there to get, again, the high performance diet. As well, again, if you are new to reef keeping, while you're there, you can subscribe to Reef Tutor, which is basically a video series that I've been putting together since about 2007. Has well over 250 videos of how to keep and maintain a saltwater and coral reef aquarium. And again, we're not talking saltwater coral reef here, we're talking freshwater aquariums. So let's head on over to Mike's place and check out, again, the lessons that he's learned in his freshwater planted tank. What are we doing today, sir?
Today we're talking about a tank that I literally brought back from the dead.
No.
I rarely admit this, but this tank, my planted tank, was a disaster. I shifted over and wanted to do a easier version of this tank.
Yes.
If you recall last time,
yes,
Aunt Martha being hit by a train was laying by the side of the no. We shifted over to a simpler system. I went to a sump underneath with lights on it, with Miracle Mud and plants, and no water changes. Well, after 3 months, because of the nutrient load that I have, and because obviously how many fish, because I love fish,
right?
Yeah, and plants too, and corals, and we know that. But I basically the nutrient levels got to be so high in here, particularly the nitrates, got over 100, and as a result, I started growing the black encrusting saw algae, right. And it was growing over everything. All of the driftwood was covered with it, the rocks were covered with it, the broadleaf plants, the crypts, the anubias were covered with it. Everything was, the tank looked gray and dank, the fish were I was literally thinking after I got back from Italy, I was going to tear the whole thing down and start from scratch.
Right.
And I talked to the guys at Oddball Pets, and they basically said, no, you don't need to do that. That's actually an algae that you can treat. What you have to do is, 1, get your nitrates down, 2, go back to doing water changes, and then I found a couple of compounds that actually worked to more or less dissolve all of the algae in the tank. And the tank came back to where it is now. A lot of the plants that had algae on them, I could cut away small portions, put those back in. Those have come back. I got a few other new plants, not a whole lot actually, probably like 4 or 5 new plants, filled in the spots, and the tank has come back and is as good as ever. And it's kind of amazing to me how getting the nitrates down in this tank and going back to doing water changes. I'm back to doing a once a week water change, 10 gallons here, and I'm using partial RODI, partial tap water.
Right.
And I'm also changing the filter once a month. I went back to using a Fluval canister filter.
Right.
Once a month, I take it offline. I take everything out. I wash out the brown gunk because it looks like a protein skimmer, what it takes out.
Right.
Everything gets rinsed and cleaned, and to go back from there, and everything is good.
So hold it. Let's talk time frames.
Okay.
Meaning,
how long did it take for the tank to crash?
Right, and why? I know we left it last time, and you were going to put a sump in. So you put a sump in.
I put a sump in, and over the course of 4 months, it gradually kept deteriorating. And unfortunately, I was traveling a lot of that time, and I didn't have the time to stop it before it got really bad.
So that's when you were doing your talks over in Italy?
And England, and Florida, and all over.
Got it.
And I just didn't have the time, because the sump was a pain to put underneath it, because I literally had to cut one of the sides, slide it in. It basically took 2 hours to take it out.
Right.
I didn't want to do that. I just didn't have the time.
Right.
So the tank just kept getting worse and worse. And like I said, I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to redo this tank totally because it's bad.
Right.
And fortunately, the folks at Oddball Pets, and from reading online and talking to people, I found several products that actually brought the tank back to life by killing off all the algae.
Right.
And also I have a couple bristlenose plecostomus, so once the algae, it doesn't dissolve it per se, but it turns yellow instead of black.
Right.
And then the plecostomus ate it all.
Got it.
And they did it all really quickly, which was amazing to me, because it was seemingly to me, it was like overnight. The tank was clear, and because the algae was so black and dark, it made the light look like it was dark and dank in the tank.
Right.
Now that everything is lush and green again,
whoa, voila.
it's like the lights were suddenly picked up, and I didn't change the lights at all.
Right.
So it's really picked it up. Now the products I was talking about is, the first one was Flourish XL. That I put into a spray bottle, a mister, and I sprayed it over all the driftwood, and I sprayed it over all the plants that had algae on it. Now,
hold on. That XL is supposed to be a carbon dosing source, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
It is some form of aldehyde. I don't remember specifically what aldehyde it is, but it converts into a carbon source, and for whatever reason, it dissolved all the algae. Now, I will be honest, it dissolved also the leaves of the plants that had the algae on it. So for the anubias, it basically took out 7 big anubia barteri, or bartieri, I don't know the pronunciation, leaves, dissolved them. But the main stalk was still good, so now the leaves are coming back. So if you use this and you spray that on something that is live, it will soon dissolve. Plants do not like this, any plants. But it did a miraculous job on the driftwood. I don't know how well you can see it, but all the driftwood is back to being clear.
Right.
There's no algae on it whatsoever.
Okay, hold on. So how did you actually spray it? Because you were talking about reducing water, this, that, and the other.
Yeah, I used a mister bottle.
Okay, so you dropped the water out of your tank.
To do the water change, I dropped the water down to where there was basically this much water left in the tank. There was about 5 gallons left in this 60-gallon tank. Okay. Poured everything off, refilled it back up with half RO, half tap water at the right temperature after I sprayed everything. I sprayed everything, I let it sit for 10 minutes, put it back in.
Boom.
It wasn't
all
boom.
the leaves fell off, everything was good.
Yeah, all the leaves fell off, everything died. No, over the next few days, I watched the black sludge algae, for lack of a better term, gradually turn yellow, and then the plecostomus eat it all away from the driftwood, or it dissolved off. I watched the leaves of the anubias die. I watched the crypts, and then I went in and cut the stuff that was dying off, because there was still enough that was alive that everything bounced back. But I also added this new product from Vibrant, which is also an algae remover. This removed the other algae that was on the rocks, on the overflow, or on the intake and everything else. This did a really nice job very quickly. This is a bacterial composition that biologically feeds the bacteria that consume algae, for lack of a better
There you go. Sure.
understanding. But this did a really good job as well.
And now you dosed that one. Okay, after you sprayed and cleaned and cleared.
Right.
Was it days after you dosed that one?
The next day I added this.
Okay.
And then I have been adding this remediation from Aqua Vitro, which is also suggested to me by Oddball Pets, and this further dissolved all the rest of the algae. So over the course of doing this, over the course of 10 days to 2 weeks, all the algae disappeared. Once all the algae disappeared, I did another water change, 50% this time, down to about here. I got some more plants, replanted where there were empty spots, because obviously I like a nice full tank.
Right.
And voila, the tank has come back. But I also did a couple other changes, which you probably noticed. One of the things that was happening, because I keep so many fish in here and so many plants, at night my CO2 levels were skyrocketing and the oxygen levels were plummeting.
Right.
And as a result, I was losing a lot of the smaller, faster, like cardinal tetras, I would lose like 1 or 2 every night. And I'm thinking, it's not a big deal.
Right.
I finally realized it was due to low oxygen levels in this water at night. So at first I put these oxygen bubbles on a bubble wand in the back, which I actually kind of like.
Yeah, I love that look.
And it has kept the oxygen levels up in the tank and drives off some of the CO2. Now the concern is, okay, well when you run this, you're not adding enough CO2 for the plants. But one of the nice things is I'm running a fair amount of CO2 in one of the little fine diffusers. When I sit over there at night having dinner, I can look long ways into the tank, and by 5 or 6 o'clock, I can watch oxygen bubbles going up off the plants, those little fine streams that I always saw in the tanks that I never had before.
Right.
Because now I'm running more CO2 during the day, and I'm also running this oxygen, and I haven't lost a single fish in a month since I've done this.
Right.
So needless to say, I think I'm finally on to something. Is it my own little device? No. It's just knowing that oxygen is an important thing for my reef tanks. And seeing what the fish were dying from, because when I would come down in the morning, half the fish were sitting at the top of the tank. Now all the fish are down in the middle, as you can see here, and everything's much settled down.
Right.
The other thing I also did was I added more flow in this tank. The tank before, I was just relying on the pump, bringing water up from the sump to maintain flow. I added another power head that shoots water around. It's not really blasting the tank. You don't see these fish really struggling against current, because most of these fish come from slow water moving, areas of water where there's slow water movement. So by doing that, I'm increasing the oxygen level at the top as well, increasing the agitation, but I'm also giving them a little bit more and keeping stuff in circulation longer so it can be sucked into the filter.
Right. Okay, so the question that I have is 4 months, everything went to hell.
Right.
You said 10 days, algae's gone.
Right.
Now, lost some leaves, etc. How many days after that initial 10 days did you start to go, wow, I like this, my plants are starting to grow back again?
Probably a week.
It was so that quick.
It was, when these plants grow in these tanks, they take off fast. Like, none of these stem plants were longer than like 6 inches. And you can see I've already done one trimming in here. I already have plants going to the surface. There's a red fire Ludwigia here that has been at the surface twice. I now have it in 2 spots where I pulled the bottom out, threw it away, and put the stems in 2 places, because that's how fast it's growing.
Right.
So, and red plants typically are more difficult.
Sure.
So for whatever reason in this tank, they've been doing really fine. The other thing, a couple other things that I have done. I still keep Miracle Mud in the filter. The filter has a mechanical filter, then it has the ceramic bio rings for a biological filter, then it has carbon, then it has Miracle Mud in pouches. So I'm still supplying Miracle Mud in that way. Now the only supplements I'm now doing is, besides adding the Flourish, I'm also adding...
there's iron under that.
There's iron. I'm also adding Excel. Oh, and here's the spray bottle that I use to say things. You can get these at the dollar store. It worked really well. Sprayed everything. And the fish tolerated it, because I add it every day. I wouldn't, add, 100 milliliters of that. I did about 20 milliliters to spray everything.
Right.
And it worked perfectly. And the other thing I make is a homemade iron that I add every day.
And as far as the homemade iron, for example, why do you even supplement iron? What's the purpose?
Iron is taken out every day, and it's one of the trace elements that plants really need for growth, and it precipitates out really quickly. So by I add 30 milliliters of this mixture every day, and you can see how the plants are doing with it.
Right.
The other thing that I add or do is I use flourish tabs underneath the crypts, underneath the lotus, underneath the plants I really, really like that are expensive. They get these.
And are those just tab forms of the liquid version of Flourish?
They're just like little cubes that dissolve slowly under the roots. Once every 4 or 5 months, I add a new tab underneath them, and it keeps the plants really lush and growing.
What's in it, you know?
I have no idea.
Okay, but it flourishes.
I just know it works, and
right.
like I said, I've tried to keep this as low-tech a tank as I can.
Right.
And obviously, I keep lots of fish in this tank as well.
Right.
There's rainbow fish, there's cardinal tetras, diamond tetras, flag tetras, black and red phantoms, pencil fish, gold tail tetras, and the 2 big angelfish that were put in right when I started the tank. That were basically this big, that are now, and they've actually spawned twice in here.
Really?
Yeah, I haven't tried to raise the spawn because I don't have, and these aren't really like prize angelfish that, you know, I'd get like a nickel a piece for,
right.
So it's not really worth the time. But they've been spawning on a regular basis. And feeding wise, this is primarily all dry food, but I do throw in a little bit of mysis. When I'm feeding all my reef tanks mysis, they get some at night, and I think that's why the angelfish are fat and happy, and the rainbow fish really start to show their colors after a month or so. I did lose about 1/3 of the fish through all this transition. Because of the low oxygen levels, I did lose the rainbows that were in here because I had 2 beautiful males that were showing the dark blue coloration.
Right.
And I lost all the cardinal tetras. Oh! Yeah, I know. But those are sort of like the fish that you know if you're doing well or not.
Right.
If you start losing the cardinals, then you have a problem.
Right.
And like I said, I was traveling and stupid and didn't have the time to manipulate things in here.
Right. Right.
I knew there was a problem, and this is my 6th of 6
right.
tanks. So this was going to get the attention after all the others.
Right, right.
So as a result, but now that it's back, I actually still like this tank as one of my favorites because 1, I can see it the best when I'm sitting and eating dinner, and 2, when I need to relax, unlike a reef tank, I can literally walk here and grab the fish out with my hands because they're much calmer.
Right.
So it's a lot more relaxing tank to look at.
And, kind of through this, I know when you went to the Miracle Mud method, I think Ling recommends, for example, that you do no water changes.
I disagree with that wholeheartedly.
Obviously, because
well, I think you may if you don't have as many fish in your tank as I do.
Right.
But because I have so many fish in this tank, it didn't work because I feed heavily, the plants grow heavily. But when I see what I take out of the filter every month,
right.
I mean, you're talking as much as I take out gunk-wise of what I'm taking out from the 300
right.
every week in detritus. I mean, that's how brown and nasty smelling it is. I have to rinse off everything because it's totally caked on. Because there's a big sponge filter that you have to go clean out really thoroughly with kind of a power washer.
Right.
I've replaced the floss. The ceramics are all coated in brown gunk. The carbon needs dumped out because it's covered with brown gunk. And the Miracle Mud I'm going to change every 3 months because it's just a small amount.
Right.
But needless to say, because of the trace elements being released all the time from the Miracle Mud and what I'm adding, I'm really happy with how this tank and how the fish are doing now.
Sure. I guess to that point, you also mentioned that you were using RO water, right?
Was using the Mighty Mite or
that little
one. The problem with it is because of how much water I use in my tanks up here, the filters needed to be changed fairly quickly. I also had a little problem with leakage, so I'm now going back to the old standard. I'm going back to the Bulk Reef Supply RODI unit. I'm plugging it in up here. I'm just getting rid of some of the cleaning supplies that I have under there because space is the issue, and this is what I'm going back to using because it's a tried and true piece of equipment. Right. I mean, I've been using one of these downstairs for the past 5 years since I started.
Right.
So running another unit up here isn't that big a deal, and it also makes the main reason I put this up here, I hate schlepping buckets of water up and down the steps.
Sure.
I mean, it keeps me in really good shape, but it's not ideal for my back.
Right. And again, to your point, at least with that unit, it's been around for how many decades? I mean, I don't know. To me, they've always did a great job kind of supplying.
Yeah, it's a reliable unit, and that's what I'm looking for RODI water.
So now, do you know what the blend between RODI and tap kind of is that you're shooting for?
I'm doing a 50-50. When I do this tank, I'm doing 10 gallons a week. I have 2 buckets. One is RODI that I've mixed up. The other one is tap water that I mix up. Okay. To match the temperature, I take a pitcher of water, stick it in the microwave, get it to the temperature, and add it to the bucket until I got it to the temperature, because this tank is kept at 79 degrees.
Okay.
I know some say you should keep it at 80, 81, but for whatever reason, 79 seems to be working perfectly right now. And I'm not going to change anything.
Right.
When things are working, I finally got it back to where it was. Actually, to me, it looks better than it was, and I'm actually even keeping more fish than I did before, which being a fishaholic as well as a coralaholic, but now just with those oxygen bubbles going up, I'm able to keep more fish in this tank.
Sure. And now, okay, so if we go back to the water for 1 second, originally, were you doing an 80-20 kind of ratio?
Yeah, I was doing 80-20 RODI, but when I was in Italy, the plant guru there said, nah, just do 50-50, and that'll take care of things, and I've been listening to him.
Right.
And it's been working. So, I mean, I'm trying to make this, like I said, as simple as I can. So doing tap water is a lot easier than doing RODI.
Yeah, roger that.
So I'm just doing that. I did change, I also did change the mesh net. I went from 1/4-inch squares to 1/8-inch squares because for some reason the pencil fish and the hatchet fish still could get out through a 1/4 inch. The hatchet fish you see are like at least as big as my thumbnail. They should not fit through.
Right.
But I would find one every day. But since I've gone to this 1/8 of an inch, and it's also clear, and obviously there's enough light, it's been working really well. So if you're doing freshwater, I strongly suggest you go to 1/8 inch mesh, unless you're doing big fish rather than the 1/4 inch mesh. But the hatchets and the pencil fish will all jump out of the tank.
And lighting, you haven't changed the lighting?
No, I'm still running a Radion. This is a 2nd generation, and I'm running it on their plant template. And I've seen they actually built a, as we talked about on the plant video with Sanjay's, they did build a plant light, but they only made 2 of them, and Sanjay has 1 of them. But I'm running their standard one, and to me it's working perfectly on this tank.
So when you were having all of the algae problems, did you at all play with the light cycles at all?
I brought it down. I shut it off for a couple days. I did
all the normal things we do on the reef side.
Yeah, I did everything I normally would do, and it didn't make any difference.
Got it.
I lowered the greens. I lowered the reds. Didn't make any difference. So I went back to their simple template. I'm running it at about 50-55% of max. So I'm not running a whole lot of light. I'm running it. It looks bright, but it's really not that much light. I could really blast this tank if I wanted to. But right now, I mean, the red plants have stayed red. The tiger lotus is as nice as it's ever been. The red Ludwigia grows up to the surface and is gorgeous. So all in all, I'm really happy with where this tank has come from where it was right before Thanksgiving. I mean, at Thanksgiving, I seriously was thinking of tearing this down and possibly setting up a bigger tank because that's how I think. But I'm lucky I listened to people that knew what they were doing with plants, and it worked. I mean, doing those 3 things to get rid of the algae and more or less starting all over again. Like I said, I put in probably 5 or 6 new plants to replace the ones that died. I got rid of the Blixia japonica simply because it became kind of a pest in this tank. It filled up the whole left-hand side of the front.
I love that one.
Yeah, no, I may get it again and put it back there. But I added a crypt that's low growing because I do want to have more of a view of the tank. And I'm still going back to the once a week trimming the plants. When I do the water change, I'm trimming stuff again. So it's good from that standpoint.
So if we look at future, right now you're saying we're going to leave the future just as it is.
I'm not going to play with this tank. I've already done my experiment. There's a couple other new fish I'm looking to add. I'm looking to get some of the spotted head standers, which are kind of cool, like this big, and they're black and white polka dot, or black polka dots on it's kind of a silver body. And maybe some of the weird pencil fish. But that's pretty much about it. I mean, there's really not room for a whole lot of new fish. I did add a couple new fish that I really like in here. I got some yo-yo loaches.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
And there's a school of 7 of those, and they sort of hang out. They're like marine catfish, and that they swim in a ball, and they actually are kind of funny. And their nickname is Yo-Yo because they do like yo-yo around. So those are cool. And what else is different in here? The SB rasboras, which are look like the Harlequin rasboras, except their color's a little bit brighter.
And besides those fish, you're just going to let well enough alone then? And
what I probably will do over time is thin out some of the bunch plants, some of the stock plants, and just go more and more crypts and stuff. I'm taking this Sanjay mindset of make this as minimal as possible. Because I do get tired having to trim these every week.
Sure.
But it's not a bad thing because I get to share the plants with people like you.
Right.
So
Right.
it's not bad in that context, but it does become a pain. But I have all the scissors and all the plant tools to work with it.
Right.
But as long as things stay relatively stable in here, I don't see a lot of changes.
Right. And I guess on that note, what we'll do is we'll kind of cut it and maybe do another 6-8 month kind of update somewhere along the line.
Yeah, next summer we'll look at it and see where we are, see if I'm all crisp by then or had to redo something else. But for the most part, and we'll have a pretty good idea how the fish look compared with then versus now, or now versus then. Whatever.
Perfect. Thanks, Michael.
Thanks, Russ.